Hi everyone, I'm Bella.
And hi, I'm Sanya. Welcome to another episode of our Pride Month special series, where we'll be exploring stories of queerness, healing, and what true advocacy can look like.
In our last episode, we spoke with Dee, the founder of Queer Gully, about mental health, gender fluidity, and building safe emotional spaces. And today we are joined by incredible Sonal Giani, a nationally recognized LGBTQIA plus advocate, gender and inclusion specialist, and diversity and equity consultant.
Thank you, Bella. Thank you, Sanya, for having me here. Happy Pride Month to both of you.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Sonal. So today we'll be diving a little bit deeper into what advocacy actually means on the ground. So the kind of emotional labor and the kind of, turmoil one has to go through when they're trying to build what the future of true inclusion looks like.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that question. I think that inclusion has been a very, deep focus theme in my life. I identify as a bisexual woman. I also identify as non-binary. And growing up, I very much understood that, my sexuality or my gender identity is different from other people. And when you have felt the difference, that is when you kind of understand what inclusion is also. They're very much connected, right? So for me, actually, inclusion in the beginning really went to when I was starting out, at least, it meant that to come together, be with people, create a movement, do a journey together. But over a period of time, I realized that it needs to be the other way around. A marginalized community will obviously continually try to push for inclusion because they are very much aware of the discrimination that they are facing. My focus currently, however, is right now to work with different stakeholders to build inclusion across different fields. And of course, inclusion is also a daily practice, right? ऐसा नहीं है कि inclusion वही है ना, inclusion is not a destination actually, it's just a journey. It's a practice. बहुत discipline लगता है, बहुत focus लगता है सीखने के लिए. Yeah, that's where I am.
I really love this idea of inclusion as a practice, particularly because it's not just a theoretical idea, but something that lives and breathes in how we experience our day-to-day lives. And I think it is so important, as you said, to be self-reflective because it doesn't matter what you've experienced, right? It's so easy to fall into a trap of presuming that because you've experienced marginalization or othering, that you won't do the same thing to others, when in fact, it's very easy and it's something that can really slip in to our behavior. So I really appreciate what you shared there.
Yeah. I think similar to like what you just mentioned, right? Like because when communities are not self-aware, then we don't continue to be inclusive within our spaces. And I think it comes from a space of believing we are already inclusive, which is the problem with the larger society. A lot of times people genuinely think that they are not discriminating. They genuinely have an unconscious bias or, they are really not aware of their privilege. It's not a space or, at least in my experience, it's not been intentional. But that is exactly the problem, right? That is what we have to kind of challenge. We have to build that muscle to constantly be able to recognize that there may be a difference in the space, to keep your ears open, to keep your whole self grounded and aware of what's happening around you.
So I'd be super curious to sort of explore what you mentioned, that inclusivity has to come not just from the people who've experienced marginalization, but also those who are sort of benefiting from the system that they're a part of. So people with privilege of any type, actually. I'd be curious to understand that, does that work? Do people in that position really acknowledge or want to work across an ecosystem that's trying to shift towards inclusivity, or are they a little bit more comfortable in their position?
So actually, I've been in an interesting place because I'm talking about a particular subject about marginalization, which is in my own lived reality as well. And it takes a lot of emotional burden. It is definitely a lot of emotional work that you have to kind of process as an activist because you are also lived reality, but you are also, you have the responsibility to sort of educate people. In terms of when you work with communities, actually, it helps to help them kind of be more conscious themselves of what is the power play in place, what is the privilege and where to question it. Sometimes we ourselves are not aware of it because we are, part of societies. In terms of when we work with like the larger community, है ना, who may not be aware of queer communities, what at least I do is that I've recognized that it helps to be, in my case at least, it helps to not get adversarial actually. It helps to let people know that, this is a learning space. It's all right to be politically incorrect, but remember, this is a learning space and you need to come with an intention of learning. So even if you say something politically incorrect, it's not like we're going to cancel you for it, but we will, let you know what the reality is, what are the facts and figures, what are statistics actually looking like, and then build a space of respect. So I found that it is very useful to keep the conversation very much like centered around this being a safe space, and it's a conversation based space. You may be, to be aware that there might be community persons in the room, so to address the questions respectfully. And what I've recognized with the Indian communities is key, and this I keep repeating over and over, like I've spoken to thousands of people, like my recognition of the pattern within the community is that Indian communities is that it is not anger or hate, it's mainly ignorance. People don't really know because there hasn't been enough conversation, and the little bit that they have seen in some films or some passing kind of narrative through media is what they've understood to be the truth. And I always tell people, especially activists, to not go with the intention thinking everybody's homophobic just because they are sitting on the fence. Sometimes they just don't know enough information, and they become your biggest allies when they have the information. The other pattern that I've sort of noticed in India is that people like to do, like, play devil's advocate. They want to question you or grill you. So that is when an expert comes into the picture. That really helps. This is why I tell communities that you don't need to, because it's a lot of emotional work. हमारा मेन प्रॉब्लम ये है, मैंने देखा कि लोग पढ़ते ही नहीं है. द इन्फॉर्मेशन इज एवरीवेयर अराउंड, बहुत आराम से इजीली अवेलेबल. एक गूगल सर्च कर लो, सब पता चल जाएगा, बट लोग वो नहीं करते हैं. एंड आई हैव ऑलवेज ट्राइड इन माय लाइफ टू ट्राई टू be more aware and operate with the politics of love, because I feel far too often our narratives, no, they are centered around the politics of hate. I genuinely believe that people can change over a time. Nobody holds an opinion forever, and if we engage respectfully, things can change. Sometimes, like, you have to recognize that people don't have access to the information you have. They don't have access to the narratives you have. So let's just work with that and see where we can reach in a middle place.
Same with me also. So we are basically a mental health tech company, and I have used our program, and like now it is easier. Like I can listen to people and without being upset, and like I have started working on myself, and yeah, it helped me a lot. So since you have shared that you are currently working in diversity, equity, and inclusion also, so I really wanted to ask you, from your work in workplaces, how does this play out? What are the biggest gaps in how organizations are supporting queer mental health?
So I would say that when it comes to workplace inclusion, India has actually has improved quite a bit, from like even something as a short way back, like 10 years ago to now. Zameen Asman ka fark hai. There's a lot of difference from earlier to now, but we have a long way to go. The difference now is that you are actually finding that, certain companies, not all of them, but definitely multinational companies, have started talking about diverse communities. They are considering employee resource groups. There are policy changes. They talk about insurance. They are actually actively hiring. The reality, though, is although the policy framework is beginning to turn friendly, it's not necessarily translated into the culture. So the problem is that your policy is limited to that workplace, but the employees are all coming in from different parts of society. There's a continuous turnover. They will continue to bring that, belief system. If I am a community member, and I'm not sure that this place is actually friendly, there's no clear-cut indication, then in some way or the other, one learns to self-edit. self-edit in the way of ki, one is not talk only, like don't talk about your relationship or your gender identity or your sexuality. The other is also just in the body itself. Like, there's a constant monitoring of your own body. How are you walking? How are you talking? Here also, you will not express yourself. You will not wear the clothes that you like. You might feel that, you might be getting taunted or you will be commented on for dressing in a particular way.
Yeah.
So the thing is that in such workplaces, essentially what happens is that your body is always tensed up. It's not relaxed. It's not easy. It's not functioning with the kind of ease that's required. So that is one piece of it. Second piece ye hai ki agar your culture, like I feel that, culture, it eats policy for breakfast. Okay. So if your culture is not really supportive, what ends up happening is despite having all of these policies, people are not aware of them. एक में majority India में कोई HR policy कुछ नहीं पढ़ता है, किसी को कुछ मालूम नहीं है, and people don't think policy कुछ effective भी है, कोई अपने HR विचार के पास नहीं जाने वाला है. When you have problems, you actually will approach your, somebody you report into, and oftentimes a manager may not have been trained, or because there's so much turnover also, may not have been trained on how to work with a queer employee. They also, so the other thing also happens, which मैंने काफी देखा है communities के साथ, that there will be hiring process and a trans person will be hired, and the entire onus of performing really well is put on that particular trans employee, and the trans employee then will end up overworking to just prove themselves, which is not happening with the others. To prove themselves, they are like, working doubly hard. When it's coming to the company actually sensitizing other people, they're not doing enough. So true workplaces are different. They do sensitizations, and more importantly than sensitization, they do regular interventions. And thirdly, there's a very clear-cut accountability, because when we say culture is good, it's not necessary that the culture is good if there are no complaints. The culture is good if people are actually reporting a complaint and that is being addressed. There's a mechanism to be addressed and there is a change possible. Because society is not there yet. है ना? तो अगर मेरे को कोई कंपनी मिलती है जो बोलती है कि कोई भी केसेस नहीं है, कोई ट्रांस पीपल आउट नहीं है, we are so friendly, that's not a good sign. It's really not a good sign. So it does center. और एक ये भी होता है कि because of all of these things, a constant self-editing, constant burnout, constant productivity needs, constantly answering questions, of course, mental health issues will emerge, The burnout is higher with the community, or depression, or a feeling of isolation, a feeling of being constantly monitored is very, very high. And it's not necessary that kind of support system is being provided. It is actually as simple as the manager keeping on checking in with you how you are, or like actually keeping a track of how much hours you are working in, how much effort you are putting in, are you having constant support, is the mental health needs of your employee being met. So ये onus बहुत important है कि we shifted from the community person to actually the management and the leadership. ये बहुत ज़्यादा important है.
Yeah, I've also seen that, because I have seen my friends, my community members working in different companies, and they have been overburdened by the work, and like they have this kind of feeling that we have to prove more, we have to like do hard work more,
because you've been made the poster boy for the whole community, right?
Yeah.
Like, which is not fair. I'm hiring a woman and saying, you represent all the women and now you must perform well. And if you did not perform well, I say, women just don't work well.
Oh, Sonal, I know exactly what you're talking about. At Adagio VR, we call this the triple burden of diversity in the workplace. You're already walking into work with a much higher experience of adversity and rejection and distress in your life because you live in a world that isn't built for you. And then you're expected to represent an entire identity or population of people while justifying that you're there not just as a DEI hire, but because of the quality of your work as a person. And then you're in an institution that hasn't really changed. You're still experiencing the micro and macroaggressions, which deeply hurt and perpetuate the distress that has been happening throughout your lifetime. So no wonder there is a huge amount of attrition and compassion burnout and representation burnout within diverse workforces. But I'd be curious to understand from you, now that there is sort of this global pushback on DEI and there is this rejection of this idea of DEI, even though there's plenty of research to show the value for an organization to have diverse populations working for them and the type of business benefit that that brings. I'd be curious to understand from your perspective, what is that global blowback and how that's impacting workforces in India and workplaces and their decision making?
In a way, this whole Trump DEI executive order, it's been good because you are able to separate the performative allyship from actually real allyship. And the people who are kind of continued to have these efforts, they are the ones who are actually genuinely concerned about. मेरे लिए better है कि आप मत बोलो कि आप inclusive हो जब आप actually inclusive नहीं हो. Because there's also a danger when a place presents itself as inclusive and then employees join there, believing it's inclusive, and actually it's not. It just, you're actually pushing us into unsafe environments. And that's where the violence happens because the culture is not safe. It's happened in my own personal case where, I had joined a particular organization which claimed to be very queer friendly and queer friendly policies, but didn't really have that culture to match with it. So it was common to sort of, being here for hearing microaggressions or jokes on the community and, things like that. आई थिंक ये DEI का मुझे वरी क्या है कि जो जिस तरीके से कॉन्वर्सेशन बदल रही है particularly around gender, it's fueled by a lot of misconception, a lot of hate, है ना? So that kind of actually increases the risk of violence against the communities, and it risks the dismantling of the necessary amenities like bathrooms that are very necessary for any employee. So there's a real danger in the way this narrative is being peddled. I'm seeing it a lot on LinkedIn as well, where there are groups who are calling themselves activists but anti-trans activists. So I don't know what that kind of activism is that is so hateful in nature, which is not really grounding itself in research. So these are things that we thought that has been dealt over the years, but then you bring back that kind of narrative. So hey, वापस reveal. It's a lot of emotional work also to keep going back to stage one, step one, and keep repeating it. It doesn't create an environment of inclusion at all. If people who are working on in any kind of workspace think that by taking away these DEI initiatives, they are making room for more equality, they are very sadly mistaken. In fact, DEI initiatives have actually made the space safer for everyone. That's what is the message that we need to kind of bring forward, that when you allow a trans person to dress freely, you're actually giving the signal to all the women and all the men that they can also dress freely. It's not we're taking away right. I thought that some of these MNCs were really taking the step forward. They were changing the culture. They have actually brought a lot of visibility for LGBTQI plus communities. But then when they roll back, the signal that they are sort of giving is that this was never necessary in the first place. So this is not a good sign for anyone. If you'll discriminate against one. Today you will discriminate against a trans person dressing a particular way. Tomorrow you will discriminate against a woman wearing skirts. That's the way I see it. So you're not creating a better workplace in any way.
And in your work, have you seen this significant rollback, even the early signals of it? And how are you navigating this, both professionally but also personally?
So I think like when it comes to personally experiencing the rollback, this is not something new for me. In India, I've seen the 2009 judgment, Section 377 judgment, and then looking at the rollback of that judgment and then bringing in that judgment again. Now seeing the marriage equality. So if you've been in activism for a long time, you know that this is part of history. The rollback, pushback, comeback, all of that is very much part of history. What is interesting for me as an activist is that, these are the times that kind of reveal the real homophobia and transphobia, which might have been which might have been like people would have done a cover-up job around, and you may not have been aware of, right? The second piece is also when you see like companies kind of rolling back, recognizing that they were performative in the first place. So then you turn your eye to the ones who actually survived, who have actually managed to stay uh, true to the thought of inclusion, and then what are they doing differently, right? And those best practices are the one that you need to take forward, because the way this particular issue is, the tide will turn, it will be positive again. But then we must not forget that what happened. So I see this as a span of time that to me is a learning exercise. Having said that, it's not easy for communities. It's not very easy. It's a very violent time. It's not cool what's happening, and there is a real repercussion. Like, for example, I'll tell you that I was previously on the board of the United Nations joint program on HIV/AIDS, and this kind of pushback on gender and inclusion has actually led to the closure of gender affirming clinics in India, gender affirming clinics across different countries. It's resulted in the rollback of medication, much needed medication, much needed pre-exposure treatment that could have really dramatically brought the HIV infection in communities down. तो इसका बहुत real impact है और life पे impact है, because of organizations which are peddling these narratives that the community is anti-family and child abusive. It actually is creating a lot of phobia and harm and violence to communities. For me, the best learning moments were in my personal life was when the Section 377 it got reversed, because it brought a different kind of impetus. It was an impetus of survival, sure, but the impetus of survival also allowed you to learn a lot through that period. And it also helps you identify the real allies. The allies, sometimes even allies, they don't do the work because they feel okay, community is leading. But in these kind of times, the allies will stand up and they will kind of push the work, and that solidarity builds in very difficult situations. So I am an optimist. So I see these as something very natural that was going to happen. There was going to be a pushback. We needed to work harder. We did not address a lot of issues. So, मेरे लिए ज़्यादा important है that I need to feel authentic. So I focus on what I can change, and leave the rest to a larger process of constant self-growth. And I can't define the journey for anybody else except mine. So I just focus on myself and leave the rest up to time.
Yeah, that's so great. Thank you so much for your answer, Sonal. I would really wanted to ask, like, the advice or some suggestion you would want to give a queer person in the workplace right now, navigating these challenges or superficial allyship versus real behavior when it is challenging.
So to a queer person who's listening to this, who's currently in an environment that's not friendly, I just want to say that, you're not alone. You may be alone in that particular workplace, but you're not alone. There is a very huge community outside, and we are in this together. And times will change. It does get better, with time. If you are someone who's feeling that the workplace is not externally is not pushing for any sensitization, there are communities that are available that you can approach to kind of initiate a sensitization within your company. If you are in terms of if you are actually again at the receiving end of a full backlash and discrimination, where they're trying to and this is happening, right, where people are firing people or laying off people. So it's also a right. You have certain work related rights. They don't go away just because you're a trans person. And again, it's important to be educated about your rights. And if you're not aware of what your rights at the workplace are, again, just reach out to any community-based organization in your area or activists who can then give you that information. But don't feel alone again. Bring people from outside. Let the sensitization be from someone outside. You don't have to take the responsibility, right? You can actually just build a connect and get an educator or a facilitator or an activist from the community who is well trained to come in and handle this. And again, it is never your fault. This discrimination that's happening. बहुत बार ये होता है कि we have actually grown up with a lot of internalized discrimination, internalized stigma. तो we कितना भी करो वो feeling कि maybe I deserve this, it exists. Hold space for that feeling, but don't believe it. It is not your fault, right? And this is just really the environment that has to change. The onus constantly in your mind, if somebody questions you about a particular thing, question them back. दूसरा ये है कि I've also found कि inclusion, at least culture inclusion, it's also about the personality. आप कितने inclusive हो उस पे dependent है कि लोग, उस पे भी depend करता है कि लोग कैसे निकल के आते हैं आपको support करने. Because everybody is marginalized in different kinds of ways. Maybe us is because gender and sexual identity, but there could be a mother who's coming into office after 3 months and people are not taking her seriously, or a young person who's going through depression, but their depression is not being taken seriously in office. So identify ways where we are, can identify a solidarity and be there for each other. तो चीजें उससे बदलती हैं. But यही है कि अगर आप सोचोगे आप अकेले हो ना तो आप बहुत फंस जाओगे, आप आगे सोच नहीं पाओगे. That's why we believe in community and allyship in the movement. ना हम community क्यों बना रहे हैं? ताकि हमारे एक support system रहे. तो use that support system. It's being built for you. We are building it for each other. एक और ये भी है कि I will also encourage people to take up counseling and therapy, even if you are in a good place. ठीक है? Because the therapy will help you recognize, what are the tools that exist from your life that you can use for agency. So it makes you more effective in navigating and challenge this, kind of workplace which is challenging.
I have experienced that because, before joining Adagio VR, I was working in an organization, and there were I used to see my community members have this kind of pressure, and like those stress passes on and it will transfer also. So उनको देख के मैं भी stressful हो जाती थी कहीं ना कहीं. And we have this session of Adagio VR with us. We have the whole program with us, and I've seen people's transformation, my transformation also. Like I used to feel very burnout. थोड़ा सा भी काम होता था मुझे ऐसा लगता था बहुत सारा काम है, डेस्क पे फाइलें पड़ी हैं, कैसे करूंगी ये वो. But eventually now I realizes कि I have become a very sharp, a focused person, and I can do more things at a time.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying ना. Like यही तो है ना, the power of an inclusive workplace यही होता है, आपको personally भी बदल देता है वो.
Yeah, and I'd love to ask a little bit more about the practical barriers that exist. So within organizations, there's often individuals who are really committed to creating this change, and they might even have the power, influence, or budget to really invest in inclusion. But unfortunately, implementing that can be quite difficult. Creating organizational change, bringing in more products, more projects, more programs within a company can be really, really tough, and particularly in high intensity work environments. So when you're working within India and the type of work culture that exists, where it's very much a go, go, go all the time, where maybe investing in people is still a relatively new approach to how business culture is made. How does someone in an organization push that change in the face of institutional comfort or, just general apathy? And how do they bring urgency to the type of work that we're both obviously working towards?
And I think when there's a kind of inaction or there isn't enough support when you're trying to push an initiative, I would suggest from my work life, I think 2 things have really helped from the sensitization that work that I've done. One is that you just have to lobby with the leadership. Nothing moves. If there's an organization where things are not moving, the buck stops at the leadership. For sure, there's somebody in the leadership who's resisting it or doesn't understand it. So if you don't have that kind of energy, you need to build a space to interact with the leadership and the leadership to push it. Now I understand sometimes you're too junior, or you may not have that kind of access to your top leadership. Yeah, in that situation, then I would say that begin with trying to create a smaller community within it. If your organization allows for an affinity group or employee resource group, create that, because there's a lot of power in an ERG reaching out to queer people to map out their needs and their requirements from the organization. So when you present it as a community finding, it is much easier to push for a conversation with the leadership.
Yeah, essentially. So, how do you create that clarity of understanding of why an institution needs to make this much effort to do something new, particularly when it's to do with inclusivity, and create the type of inclusive work environment that we know creates that sort of benefit to both the individual and organization and goes beyond like a pride post or a HR policy?
Now, in terms of like a very performative or superficial inclusion and what to me real inclusion looks like, to me the difference is that the superficial inclusion is, it's not throughout the year. It's usually like you will see them changing their, you'll see the company changing their logo to a rainbow logo, but they will have no policy in place to support communities, or it will be only when Pride Month that they are talking, and culturally things will not be different. But whereas if you look at a workplace, which is actually truly inclusive, you'll find that the one of the very easy ways to mark is just the body language of the queer people in the organization. It will be much more easygoing. People are more open to talk to you, to understand with you. Or other communities are not kind of feeling safe, that's a big thing. Second thing is, if it's an organization, they will try to do a mix of culture and institution. And institution meaning policy, but also it will be in the physical administration also. So, for example, I always say, like, it helps that, your organization should be such that if there is no employee sitting in the office, there's nobody, say it's a holiday, but a queer person opens to pick up a report, okay, or comes for a meeting there, they should know it's queer inclusive, whether it's a rainbow flag or it's a gender neutral washroom, is it, कहाँ communication material है जहाँ पे वो already LGBTQI+ friendly है. So it has to be a balance दोनों का, और constantly आप लोगों को educate कर रहे हो, about their policy. आपके जो sensitizations हैं वो काफी regular हैं. जून में ऑफकोर्स आप ह्यूज पुश करते हो, बट आप बाकी दिन भी कम्युनिटी से बातें कर रहे हो, एटलीस्ट वंस अ क्वार्टर आपका कुछ तो हो रहा है, and if there is no budget also, even then, without an event or a budget, you are seeing people around you, like, who are queer, and you are noticing a change in your own employees as well, where they have become more relaxed around pronouns, or they are, standing up for against a homophobic joke. Or
I can totally relate to it. So
Yeah.
like, I feel I'm blessed with this. Like, I feel that the workplaces should be like my workplace, because I love my workplace. So I'm going to play a game with you right now. So we have this game called Inclusion Ka Report Card
Inclusion ka report card.
with
Okay.
Sonal Giani.
ठीक है, okay.
So you have to give grades like A, B, C, or F. And I'll ask you like options. According to you, you have to grade them, and according to India.
ठीक है, बताओ.
So corporate sector.
I'll give them a D. There's a long way to go, but then I don't want to take away the ones that are doing good work.
Indian TV shows.
C. They've improved, but I'm not seeing relationships that are flourishing and surviving and happy.
Another option is common policies.
I'm going to give them a C. The reason I'm giving them a C is because when then जहाँ तक transgender community की बात है, compared to other countries हम काफी forward हैं, काफी ज़्यादा facilities available हैं, health, wealth, ये सब कुछ है. But when you talk about the larger community and things like marriage rights and property rights and all that, we're a long way. But just because of the fact that, our own HIV programs and the way the trans community is growing is बहुत unusual है. बाकी countries में ऐसा नहीं है.
Startups.
I will say city startups, I'll give them like almost very close to an A or close to a B, because it's usually young people. And for them, these conversations are very normalized. So, they're doing a good job.
News and media.
C. because the reportage has definitely improved, but it's still quite homophobic.
School and colleges.
Yeah. Because there is a lot of discrimination happening in colleges and schools. So every single kid who's queer, किसी को भी नहीं छोड़ सकते. उनको पूछो उन्होंने experience किया होगा.
Healthcare systems.
Healthcare systems, I'll give them a B. Because government systems they have created a lot of room, but I think there's still more need for sensitization. Even private healthcare ऐसा नहीं है, but बहुत work बाकी है.
Mental health spaces.
So you are now there's an emergence of queer affirmative counselors, but they are literally, you can count them in your fingers. Okay. And the problem is with the queer affirmative counselors, there's another challenge, what is happening is that they are so few that there is a conflict of interest, because you may be, my counselor and my partner's counselor, especially in community-based settings. So there's a conflict of interest within that.
Queer spaces.
Give them a C. I'll give them a C because in terms of positive work, जब हम stakeholders के साथ काम कर रहे हैं, we're doing a lot of positive work and बहुत सारा क्या कहते हैं sensitization work जो है was a class apart for the kind of country we live in. But when I talk about internal dynamics of the community, intra-community dynamics, it needs a lot of room for improvement and intersection.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sonal. This has been an incredible conversation, and there's so much alignment between what you believe in and your work and what we've been really striving to develop. So I'm really, really happy to have this conversation with you and learn from you and have these exchange of ideas. So thank you for your time. Thank you for everything. Audience, if you've liked this, please leave a comment about your experiences of doing this work and doing the emotional labor, but why it's worth it to you. I really, really appreciate that. And Sonal, thank you so much for what you've done, what you continue to do, and what you'll do in the future. Big fan.
Thank you, Sanya. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sonal, for to have you on board. Thank you so much. On a short notice, you come, and it was lovely meeting you. So, bye, guys. We'll meet you in the next episode. Till then, stay tuned for Queer Work, Queer Work.